Yes.
I'm going to ask you some questions now about the non-financial services offered by the scheme. Are there any?
Well, we put in place psychological services, support services as part of the support we wanted to provide to the inquiry, to people who might be affected by the inquiry. And this was done, a commitment was made in this department to fund those services through the Belfast Health and Social Care Trust for the duration of the inquiry. Initially 3 years, it's been rolled over into this year. However, we do recognise the need for this on an ongoing basis, and it's a part of our phase 2 review to consider how that might be progressed. And I know the Belfast Trust itself is looking at this, recognising the value and having had very positive feedback from people who have utilised the service. So it's certainly something we're looking at how we could continue that and put it on a more sustainable footing.
So those services aren't strictly speaking provided by the scheme, but they're promoted by the scheme. Is that right? To scheme members.
That's right. At the moment, they're funded within the envelope for admin costs and legal costs that we have associated with responding to the inquiry. But we do want to change that as we go forward, and we'll be looking to the inquiry's recommendations as well on that.
And does the scheme provide access to benefits advisors for members? We've heard from that's available to the English and Scottish membership. Is that something that's offered by the scheme in Northern Ireland?
Benefits advisors,
yes.
Did you say?
Yes.
I'm not aware of that. I might not be the right person to ask, but I'm not aware of that.
And we're going to hear evidence tomorrow in Wales, but from the information about the Welsh scheme, the information the inquiry has at the moment suggests that they offer a range of non-financial services, including a key worker. Is that something that the department has ever considered for the Northern Ireland scheme?
It's not something we have in place now, but all of these types of non-financial support are things that we do want to look at. The Minister's priority was to address the immediate financial needs, but we are aware that Wales are doing a lot more than us, and we're obviously keen to learn from their experiences, and that is something that we'll look at.
Moving on to a slightly different topic, to ask you about the scheme's relationship with beneficiaries and indeed the department's relationship with beneficiaries or members of the scheme. Are there any formal mechanisms in place for beneficiaries to provide feedback and advice to either the BSO as administrator of the scheme and or the department as the who sets policy on operational matters or on policy?
Well, speaking for the department, we don't have any regular arrangements. We do receive a lot of correspondence, or have, particularly in the last couple of years, to which we respond. And I know my team's had direct contact with various people who've been speaking for beneficiaries. Certainly the scheme administrator has a lot of contact with beneficiaries and provides advice in that way. I know he's very committed. Again, I can't speak for them about whether they have any other more formal ways of engaging with beneficiaries, but I know that the individual in charge of the scheme, as you said earlier, there's just one person, is very familiar, has developed good rapport, and he's, I think the feedback through the survey was very positive on that as well. Something though that we are looking at how we take forward the enhanced payments for hepatitis C stage one, we're going to set up some kind of consultation arrangement specifically about that in the very near future.
So we heard evidence yesterday from about the Scottish scheme, and they have, for example, an advisory group in place that meets twice a year and provides input into operational matters, how things are done by the scheme rather than policy matters. Is that something that the department might consider in this in phase two, looking at how the scheme is operating?
Certainly the whole subject around how we engage, how we communicate, some of the things we talked about before the break, about making sure that people are aware that the schemes exist, and if they're on the schemes, knowing what's available to them. All of those things are part of our consideration in phase two.
You've mentioned the results of the survey. We haven't gone to it. I can go to it if it'd be helpful. But one of the outcomes of the survey was that 90% of those that responded rated the service as good. So I think there were 56 beneficiaries that responded. Do you have any? Can you assist us as to what the department's view is about that, and why that number is so high? What is working well?
Honestly, my view is that it's the personal contact and the individual that we have in that role. So the feedback I've had, not even via the survey, has always been positive. We've worked with him, and my team's worked with him over the financial analysis that I talked about that we did in 2019, and through those contacts and through the feedback that I've had, I can see that personal contact is so important, and perhaps it's one of those real benefits of having a Northern Ireland scheme, because Northern Ireland is a very small place, and the scheme membership is quite a low number compared to the other administrations. So we do really benefit, I think, from having that personal contact. We lose out on the economies of scale, certainly as a policy official working in a very small administration, trying to keep up with what's going on in Whitehall. It's very, very challenging. I think everybody across the departments in Northern Ireland would say the same. But on the administration of this scheme, I think that the small scale of it and that personal contact are just have worked very well. And it started well because we really did focus so hard. I do remember this from my first year in post, how focused we were on not interrupting payments. It was a really big thing for me and my team. We had to get this moved seamlessly across into the Northern Ireland scheme. And again, BSO played their part in making sure that happened. They were very committed to it, like we were, and there was no interruption in payments. And so I think it started well as well.
And finally, from me, just some questions on the funding, how the scheme is funding and how that operates. First of all, in relation to the sources of funding, so you've told us already that there's funding available from London in relation to the changes that have been made to the scheme, and you've explained that that's going to be looking at effectively the past 3 years. It's right, isn't it, that they also provide funding for the HIV element of the scheme, and that's been a decision that's was made. That funding has been provided from 2017.
Yes, that's right, and I think this dates back to the fact that the HIV schemes were there pre-devolution, whereas the hepatitis C schemes were set up after devolution. So what happened, I understand it, before we had our own scheme, was that Whitehall funded the HIV schemes and we reimbursed the schemes, the hepatitis C schemes. So we would build, if you like, for that money. And so then when the scheme came to Northern Ireland, we just directly paid and managed the budget for the hepatitis C. But we had a 3-year, I think it was at that time, funding commitment for HIV. We've subsequently had discussions about that, and I understand we are going to get some money this year, but it's falling short of our total costs for various sort of technical reasons. There's another piece of funding as well, which is we fund lump sums from provisions, which is a pot of money that was set aside quite some time ago, which I understand we can top up if we need it. Again, that's quite just an administrative sort of technical point. I think the biggest point is that the HIV payments were coming from Whitehall. We don't have any long-term certainty about that, and it's caused us, we've had to top up last year, and we'll have to do it this year as well, possibly even the year before. I'd have to refer back because we had a shortfall, so we've topped up with in-year bids in our own administration. So we haven't got certainty over future years on that. Yeah.
So just sticking on that point then, you've said that the payments fall short of what it actually costs to run the HIV part of the scheme, if I can put it like that. It is right, isn't it, that in fact the provision from Whitehall has reduced in recent years, hasn't it? So is it 2019, 2020, the provision was £53,000 less than it had been the year before. Is that your understanding?
Yes, that's right. And my understanding is that that's because the way they calculate their funding transfer to us is based on the types of payments. So the regular payments, they just reimburse us in full, whereas the discretionary element of that is based on the Barnett consequentials. I think I've got that right. And because their discretionary component of their payments is reduced because of all the things we've been talking about, their overall regular payments have increased, so there's less call upon those discretionary payments. It means that the discretionary payments part of that funding hasn't been enough to meet our needs.
Because their discretionary payment need reduced, but Northern Ireland's didn't, because you hadn't put your annual payments up, so there was still a requirement for discretionary payments.
That's, in a nutshell, my understanding of it, yeah.
And it is, you've explained that there's a difficulty arising because there's no long-term commitment to that part of your funding, which causes obvious difficulties in terms of looking to the future. Has there been a further difficulty with the information from Whitehall about how much you are going to get coming in late?
Oh yes, and there's some exchanges, I think, that are in the documents that are between a former staff member of mine and people over in London about that. Yeah, but I do understand that we have been told that we will get the money this year.
Have you been told how much it is?
It's come late in the year. This is the thing. It tends to come towards the end of the calendar year, so it doesn't give us a lot of time to sort it out. Particularly now, these shortfalls seem to be happening. Yeah.
And have you been told how much it's going to be yet, or is that information that's to come?
I don't have that information, but my understanding is no, we haven't got that yet.
So you know it's coming for the next year, but after that you don't know. Is that the position?
No, we know it's coming for this year.
This year, yes. And you don't know any further into the future.
No.
In terms of how the funding works for the scheme overall, you've mentioned provision. and that's a pot of money that is sort of used as a sort of reserve fund. Is that right? Out of which you pay for discretionary support, so income top-ups and discretionary grants, and hepatitis C lump sum payments and bereavement payments for hepatitis C beneficiaries. Is that correct?
Lump sums, yes, lump sums and discretionary support.
And that is, as I understand from the information that's been given to the inquiry, was in 2017 was a pot of £1 million, and it's now a pot of around about £500,000.
Yes, I think it's even lower than that now. I think the latest numbers are more around 200,000. Yeah, but I questioned that, and I understand we can just top it up. Our finance team has said that.
And then the annual ongoing payments are paid for out of the department's budget, are they? That's
right. They come out of our programme budget. So that they'll be part, it goes back to the question that you had just before the break about inescapable. So we'd put these as part of the budgeting exercise when we basically put our budgetary expectations across the Department of Finance. We'll be basing that on, we'll be segregating things into what is inescapable and what's more optional, proactive policy work that we will want to fund. So these have always been considered to be inescapable payments that we're committed to making. And if we have a shortfall during the year, we'll use an in-year monitoring round to make that up. So particularly if there's increases in payments that we haven't got in our budget baseline, we'll have to go back in the in-year monitoring to obtain that money. So the short point is that even if the scheme, for whatever reason, goes over budget, it's fully funded by the department, and the money will be found to make the payments that the scheme needs to make. Well, we don't manage it that way. We seek to manage it so that we actually live within our budget as a department. But, we consider these to be inescapable payments, so they've always given priority in the budget. But obviously there's a lot of calls on the health budget, so it leads back to the things we discussed in the first session, that we do have to plan for these in budgetary terms. And are you aware of whether there has been a time when the scheme, so BSO, have approached the department and said, we need more money? Well, it wouldn't quite work like that, because we have a routine way of monitoring their needs. So there are times when they need more money, but it's more like that will come up through the iterative way in which we manage the finance. And we tend to know about it anyway, so because of the management information that they share with us. I'm not sure if I'm getting to the point that you... Well, let me put it this way. We heard evidence from the Alliance Health organisations that the way that budgets were managed for those organisations was that the Department of Health gave them a sum of money out of which they had to meet all the needs of the beneficiaries for the year, and there was no way of coming back to ask for top-ups if there was suddenly a run on people applying to whatever scheme it was. And so really the question is this is a different arrangement, as I understand it, that the department funds the needs of the scheme, whatever they are. Yes, that's right, and we try to manage what they are, so that we're not overspending in the department. But yes, if there's an in-year pressure on BSO, we will know about it from BSO, and we will then transfer more money to them to meet that. And then we'll have to square it up with either finding it within the department's budget through underspend, or through going back to the Department of Finance in an in-year monitoring bid.
You took the opportunity over the tea break to look at your witness statement and inescapable pressure. Is there anything that you wanted to say in relation to that? I mean, you've referred to it already, but...
Yeah, it certainly links to what we were just talking about. And I can see that the first and second references that you gave me related to the commitment that Michelle O'Neill made in 2016 to increase the regular payments in line with England's increases backdated to April 2016. So that's what they related to. And then the third reference was relating to how we dealt with the 50,000 odd pounds deficit in the HIV money that came from DHSC that last year, I think it was. So it's really an illustration, I guess, of that we didn't receive enough money, so we bid for that difference. We found that money.
Because it was
the scheme, because it's inescapable.
Yeah.
So the scheme wasn't deprived of that money. I think that's the important point.
So those are the questions that I had for Ms. Redmond. Call participants will need an opportunity to submit questions to...
Well, you'll want some time to field those questions.
Yes.
How long do you think you might need?
I would have thought 20 minutes should be sufficient.
Okay. Well, let's come back then at 20 to 5. And we shan't detain you, I think, very much longer after that. So 20 to 5.